Awesome. Hi, folks. We're just going to give it another minute, I would say, as folks come into the space. We are going to record this session today, so it will be made available afterwards too. So we'll just give it another minute before we go ahead and get started. And I start up the screen share here. So I know we're going to come on folks to join in, but the session will be recorded, so you'll have access to, or folks who will come in afterwards will have access to the recording too. So if you're here for the cover letter refresh workshop, then you're in the right spot. Just a couple of technical notes as we get started, making sure that your mic is turned off for the moment, so that way clear audio comes through. You're also welcome as well to turn on subtitles by hovering over to the bottom of Zoom and clicking show subtitles in order to display it as such. And you're also welcome to use the rename function as well in order to rename yourself in the space. And throughout an open invitation for our folks to also share, if you're joining us synchronously, your name, your department, and what you hope to gain after today's workshop. But super excited to be with you here today, and also very supportive in terms of answering any questions that you might have as well. There are a couple of activities we'll go through alongside keeping in conversation, both in this moment, but also throughout, and also at the end as well. So to officially begin, just wanted to say welcome to Cover Letter Refresh at Trinity. As you know, this is part of our series that we're offering centering around career conversations in different aspects. So this is our second of several that we're offering this year and also next as well. So this will be, soft landing into the space. And I always forget to introduce myself. So my name is Joanne. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm also joined today by Cheryl Lynn. Cheryl, do you want to introduce yourself or briefly?
Sorry, yes, I can introduce myself. Just sending some messages to some people who are asking us to record this. So my name is Cheryl Lynn, and I am, in a nutshell, the career advisor at Trinity College. So after this, if anyone is interested in any further support, they can definitely email the registrar's office and get in touch with me for any career questions or anything like that. And I think that's about it.
All right, thanks so much. And likewise, well, I work in the career space over at Career Exploration Education. And so if you also have further career questions too, feel free to connect with our center to us. We do offer a couple of different resources there as well. So encouraging folks, you're welcome to ask questions throughout the workshop. So you're welcome to send a message in the chat and ask questions related to any workshop content, or also save them towards the end as well. Where we'll also pause the recording of the video too. And as we also continue today, I also want to recognize that we are joining from perhaps jumping there. But as we begin today's workshop, I want to recognize and acknowledge that I am connecting to you on land that has been and continues to be cared for by the Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credits. And as a seller to land that I am on, that compels me to really think about what it means when I'm creating spaces of access for students, particularly Indigenous students, and what it means for programming as well, and centering folks first and foremost. As we are all located on different lands today, I will invite you to take a moment to acknowledge the land and nations who came before you and are currently with you. So I will be sharing in the chat box 2 links for you to learn more about the land that you're on. The first is Whose Land, which is North American based more broadly, and also Landmark, which is internationally based as well. So inviting folks, when you do have a moment after the workshop or throughout as well, to learn more about the spaces in which you're calling in from today. And in terms of building in community and threading that throughout the way in which we're going to be held in conversation today, I want to acknowledge that access continues to be a shared responsibility between everyone in this space. We strive to create an accessible space that reduces the need for you to disclose a disability or impairment for the purposes of gaining accommodation. And in doing this together, we strive to welcome disability and the changes it brings into our space. So do you want to hold a moment of pause here, about 30 seconds, for you to reflect on what you need to engage in this virtual space today, and if there are any access needs that we could address as a group to support your engagement. So you're welcome to private message us, or if you're listening to the recording afterwards, to also pause and reflect if there's anything that we can also do to support you asynchronously as well. So I'll give it 30 seconds there. Awesome. So just know that open invitation in case folks do have questions throughout, that you're always welcome to private message or Cheryl Lynn in order to share any access needs that we could address in this space as well. Just a note that this might also be as simple as having the option to turn your video off, or having the technical facilitator, who is Cheryl Lynn today, typing questions into the chat for you. Or perhaps sharing a direct access need that you might want to share in terms of private messaging us there. So know that that's always an option and continues to be in today's conversation. I would also like to acknowledge that the Division of Student Life at the University of Toronto is driven by a mission to enrich the university experiences for and with students by fostering learning, growth, connection, community, and support. And career education seeks to do this through a commitment to equity, diversity, inclusion, access, belonging, and reconciliation as we navigate career conversation and skill development, while simultaneously recognizing that career education is limited by its grounding in a Euro-Western worldview. And we always strive to welcome feedback throughout too. So we'll take also another 30 seconds here for folks to share into the space if you would like one thing that we can each do today to contribute to an equitable and inclusive space. Great. And as mentioned, we welcome feedback throughout if there's anything we can do to make the space more inclusive, particularly for those who are Indigenous and equity deserving groups. You're welcome to message again myself or Cheryl Lynn, but also you're welcome to email us directly at careercenter@males.careers.utoronto.ca in case there's anything you want to share as well. Excuse me. And in terms of engagement today, we are going to engage in optional mic on or sharing in the chat. So welcome questions in case there are questions throughout, or you can also say them towards the end as well. And we'll also have various independent activities to integrate today's learning. So there will be a working space available to you afterwards in case you want to stay on the call, ask questions, or also just have space to work on your cover letter. And myself and Cheryl will be around in case there are questions that you have as well. To kind of do a recap around our agenda, we'll be doing a review around the core components of a cover letter, along with individual anonymous submissions of your cover letter paragraphs that you would like. At that point, we will pause the recording too. And we'll also go into a working session and also closing and a go around, share around one thing that you're taking away from today's workshop too. So a little bit about the cover letter. So oftentimes we get asked, what is the purpose of a cover letter? What does it serve? And oftentimes following that too, do I need to submit a cover letter if it's not requested of me? So usually when it comes to these questions around why this additional document when there's already a resume that encompasses my experience, well, it does add a level of enrichment in terms of articulating who you are into the space for your potential employer. And unless otherwise stated, clearly directed or stated on the application document, always assume that cover letter is needed, as it is also a way for you to do a couple things. The first is that it's an opportunity for you to introduce yourself, your career personality, who you are, and what you want to bring to this role. It also is an opportunity for you to highlight relevant skills and experiences that might not be as readily visible on your resume. Certainly, the resume does offer a platform for you to share a little bit about who you are and your career trajectory thus far, but the narrative that tells how it's knitted together, particular experiences that you might have had that were fundamental to you applying to this role, are not always as clearly articulated there. And this is it's so important for the potential employer and also the job people to know as well, or the hiring panel to know too. The third piece is that it is an opportunity for you to demonstrate your research and writing skills by demonstrating that you have research about the company or role. And so one of the tips I will offer here in this space, but also mention as we are reviewing a couple of other cover letter paragraphs, is that you do always want to tie it back to the cover letter, paragraph to say, this is what I'm sharing by way of experience. That last sentence or last couple sentences, take time to say, and this is why I'm sharing about this particular experience that I had, because in this role, I'm going to excel in such ways. So it really is an opportunity for you to expand on that. Lastly, it is an opportunity for you to explain why you're interested in this position. So it is a place where you can explain if you've had perhaps a very conventional background, for example, or perhaps you've had a very, parallel career path in terms of being in different areas of interest. This is an opportunity for you to show with the employer, hey, I might be coming from different sectors or different industries, or even my subject post or what I'm studying might not be directly linked, but here's why I'm going to demonstrate that link to you. So truly it is an opportunity for you to demonstrate that linkages for the employer. And essentially, once an employer has read through your resume and your cover letter, they should have no doubts about interviewing you, or perhaps are curious to learn more about your career journey, and how this opportunity might line up to a future option for you as well. So then when it comes to the format and structures of cover letters, a couple of really important things. The first is around formatting. It should be one-page business letter, so i.e. on an 8.5 by 11. You should also be using the same document header as your resume. So you may have seen previous cover letters that, do the address of the employer, your address, and then you go into your cover letter. So that's actually a different way of how we used to structure cover letters. And unless you're mailing in physically the cover letter, you wouldn't follow that format. So it would be the same document header as your resume. In terms of structure as well, on the top left, you are going to include the date of the cover letter that you're writing. In terms of salutations, do use the hiring manager's name if possible. So don't refer to them as dear hiring manager, but use their full name. So in terms of what is culturally appropriate, in most cases, using their full name is absolutely okay. So that way you're not assuming pronouns unless it's been shared. Otherwise, if they do have a formal title, such as like doctor, for example, or director, for example, then you may defer to that as well as a way to address them. In terms of other structure pieces too, there is the opening and closing paragraphs, and we'll go through examples of some of those too, along with a couple of middle paragraphs that really hone in on a particular experience. And we can we will be discussing how you might go about structuring those middle paragraphs too. Make sure to always close, though, with your closing paragraph by expressing your interest for the role, and also closing with a business appropriate signature. So, i.e., if it's available to you, making sure that you do have almost a cursive signature to the very end of your cover letter as well. To make sure I covered all my notes here, but feel free as well to ask questions throughout in case there are curiosities with it too. And we'll go through our first example. So this is an example of an opening paragraph. We are going to more focus on not so much the specificities of the content, but how it's structured in this. And I will be sharing a couple of other examples too. But essentially, the opening paragraph is a brief introduction and summary of what you'll be elaborating on throughout your cover letter and what you have listed in your resume. It should include information such as what you are applying for by stating the position title and where you learn about the opening as well. So if you did learn about the opening through other colleagues, for example, or perhaps someone referred you to it, another way of opening that paragraph would be to say, upon the recommendation of many folks within the organization, or upon the referral of so-and-so, I was encouraged to apply for this role. So it could be that you do structure your opening differently depending on what your intention is with that. Either way, just make sure that you are clear on what position it is you're applying to. So if there is a reference ID or a job number that's associated with it, make sure to include it in brackets within that beginning as well. Again, quick summary of like your skills, your experiences, what can they expect to read as they're going through your cover letter, and then really iterating a brief statement of your interests. And that's where you're able to insert that research piece you did earlier. So is this organization maybe growing in new ways? Did they recently have a merger? Did they perhaps really expand a portfolio in a particular area, or are they known for a particular product? So that is where you're going to demonstrate that you've done that bit of research into the organization to really name it. And then when it comes to the closing paragraph, before I move on to the middle ones, is that you always want to make sure that you close by thanking the employer. So it should always end concisely and skillfully by, really including a gratitude acknowledgement for their time in reviewing your application, and that you would be excited to learn from them about the next steps as well. It is that final opportunity too for you to get in front of the employer to summarize your skills, your experiences. Perhaps it's your academic and career learning that has really brought together why you're interested in this role. So this is an opportunity again for you to demonstrate that alignment piece. And then lastly, closing by the next steps. So here we often get questions around, well, do I need to include, my email or my phone number? Because I really want to make sure they do know where to contact me. They will have all that information in your document header initially, because you are going to repeat it over from your resume. So no worries about taking up the space in order to repeat that. You do want to make sure that you do close in a way that expresses gratitude, but also is an opportunity for you to summarize your skills again. Middle paragraphs. So there are generally two ways in which you can approach the middle paragraph. The first way is doing a skills-based paragraph where you are focusing on a specific skill. So perhaps a skill that you're noticing coming a lot on the job posting is a skill around project management, right? So perhaps you've had a lot of different experiences that you've had to really enhance and grow your skill in project management. So perhaps it was from a time when you had to develop a team plan, or you had to make an event schedule, or you had to coordinate with other folks as well. So you might dedicate a paragraph then to talk about how you approach that particular skill. So that's one way of writing your middle paragraph. The other way is an experience-based paragraph. So what that is if you have a particular experience that is directly or very closely aligned to the role that you're applying to. So as an example, if you worked in a research lab, and you're performing, pipetting or Western Southern blots. And, that's very similar to the next role that you're applying to, where you're going to be performing similar types of lab mechanics, but you are focusing on different sample or different specimens, for example. Regardless, like the technical skills might be very similar. So you might then dedicate a paragraph to talk about a lab experience where you've had to really build out those skill sets. So that is the other type of paragraph that you might lean into, where it's one experience or one role that you're describing, or one experience you're describing, but it does contain a number of different skills the employer is looking for. So those are two different ways that you might approach your middle paragraphs. And ultimately, when you do write your middle paragraph, you want to add in new information that perhaps was not available on your resume as readily. So whether you talk about a particular situation that you had to really skillfully navigate, or a particular learning that you took away, or perhaps it's really summarizing all of your experiences or a particular skill in one way, you want to add in new information that might not have been there before. Also making sure that each paragraph does include a particular accomplishment. So if you were here for a resume workshop earlier several weeks ago, then this will be familiar. But essentially what an accomplishment statement is that you begin with what you did, so the action verb, how you did it, and then what impact it had. So you kind of want to follow a similar formula when you are thinking about the writing style that you're approaching here. And then to each end of each paragraph, make sure that you do relate it back to the organization or role that you're applying to by saying, and so this is why it's really important for you to know this, or like at X organization, I would be excited or thrilled to leverage this skill or to grow this portfolio in a particular way. Though there are different ways of framing it, it's all about bringing it back to, and this is why it's important for the employer to know that particular story that you shared on the cover letter. So we'll go through an example here around a middle paragraph. You can kind of critique it as well. But again, a skills-based paragraph is focused on a particular skill. In this case, this individual here has focused on arts facilitation as a skill that they have had to build out. So they begin with that accomplishment statement to say, over the past 2 years, I have developed skills in facilitating arts-based educational activities. So that's the big bucket idea that they want to convey first. And then they added new information, such as the kind of age groups they're used to working with, the types of settings they're used to working with as well, and then relaying it back to the job application itself. So this is a very simplistic structure of a middle paragraph, and you might find yourself adding a bit more detail as well. So perhaps talking a little bit about, like you're teaching pedagogy in this case, right? So how that's guided you in terms of building out the activities. So you might kind of outward with this person, I might kind of probe and say, hey, are there ways that we can kind of enhance this paragraph a bit further by adding a little bit more detail in terms of that as well. The other one I mentioned before too was the experience-based paragraph. So this is, again, the one where you're focusing on one past job and it has all the required skills. So in this case, they've named research reporting. So in this case, they began with naming what role they're referring to. So in this case, as a research assistant, you can tell as well, and it was similar with the other one here, but other one previously shared, but more explicit here, is their use of quantitative statements in order to really demonstrate the breadth and depth of their experiences. So in terms of talking about how many scientists they had to work with, how many tests they had to run on average as well, the kind of work process they had to develop too, or the workflow. So not only did they perform the experiments, they also had to make sure that it was communicated or disseminated properly through channels and through appropriate folks as well. So they mentioned here the added information around summarizing the reports. And then always, as they did here, relating it back to the job application. So here you can see that they are applying for a research role at Mars Discovery District for folks on campus. That's like right at the corner of university and college. So that was where they were applying to, but essentially always related back to why that particular organization. if I was speaking with a student or as a learner here, I would kind of offer and say, sounds like really interesting, applying to Mars. Is there a particular project at Mars that you're interested in supporting with? Or a particular way that we can make it even more relevant to the reader? So perhaps it's the fact that they really do have a clear process for how they choose to disseminate research, whether it's like within a lunch and learn, for example, or whether it's report writing that they release annually. So perhaps it's mentioning those smaller pieces where you would make mention and make reference to your excitement to be able to contribute to this larger project that they've been working on for several years. So that's where you really want to kind of think about those pieces where you can personalize it, but also customize it a bit further along, because it does make a huge difference. I do have a bit of an activity here for folks today. So we have two different examples here. So the first example is, as a retail assistant at Eaton Center, I worked in 200 different locations to ensure customer satisfaction with curbside pickup. I worked with staff to coordinate 100 plus daily pickup dailies while simultaneously handling confidential information and redirecting customer concerns. This experience in customer service will increase my capacity to efficiently or effectively build customer base as the supervisory barista in your cafe. So my question to you, and you're welcome to share in the chat or also private message too if you want to share it privately, is that example one. Is it an experience-based paragraph or is it a skills-based paragraph by reading it? With example one. And if okay. Amazing. So everyone's saying experience-based paragraph. So you're absolutely correct. That is absolutely an example experience-based paragraph. They've named, the role they're in, what they've done, and you can really see how they're focusing on making that case to apply to a cafe role in this case. So example two, next, we have here, during my education, I have developed skills in customer service through multiple roles, which allow me to interface with clients and guests. In several roles, I worked with guests directly to ensure exceptional service and guest experience in a restaurant environment. In my most recent on-campus role, I was able to further develop my interpersonal skills in managing a team of 5 peers. The development of these skills is directly transferable to my application as a supervisory barista with your cafe. So similar question to, in reading this example too, is it a skills-based paragraph or is it an experience-based paragraph? Awesome. Yeah, folks have gotten it. So yes, it's absolutely a skills-based paragraph. In this case, they're really focusing on their ability to develop customer relation or client relations. And so you can kind of see how that has come up and evolved over time in this various role, from having more one-on-one direct support with guests to then having a team where you're going to have to really develop relational skills in order to foster belonging as well, but also project development too. So you can definitely see how they are kind of demonstrating an arc in their development here. So again, two examples to really reflect upon, and yours will look different as well, depending on, how you want to structure it. So as a final note, before we move into a bit of activities and questions for you, or questions that you might have as well, is as you, would think about what you want to write for your cover letter, review your resume and ask yourself which, 1 to 2, 3 skills or experience you want to share on your cover letter. And that might be the best way to start to just even narrow it down to this particular skill or an experience. Make sure, as always, to pick the ones that apply most to the job that you're applying to, whether it's perhaps a story that might leave a great impression with the employer in terms of how you situate yourself, or perhaps it's a particular skill that is absolutely important as well. So that brings us to the end of the sort of lecture piece or the workshop piece of the cover letter.